Anyway, we welcome you. Eddie is the senior legislative analyst for Juan Vargas. And in addition to immigration, he is responsible for armed services, civil rights, foreign affairs, intelligence, homeland security, judiciary, NASA, and Veterans Affairs. So he has his hands full. And so we're so glad to have you back with us.
Thank you, Beryl. Thank you for the kind introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here and to meet everyone. Robert, it's good to see you again. I know we've communicated many times in the past, trying to do what we can for our veterans that have been deported, mainly veterans in the Tijuana and the Imperial Valley region, or the Mexicali region, that are our responsibility. But as we know, it's not just that immediate area where we have deported veterans. They're spread out throughout the world. And so I would like to start off maybe by talking a little bit about some legislation that recently passed the House Judiciary that deals with deported veterans. I think it was in June, Rep. Takano's office led a bill with Rep. Lofgren out of California, Jerry Nadler, who chairs the Judiciary Committee, Lou Correa, and our office, and Raul Ruiz, called the Veteran Service Recognition Act. And in a nutshell, what the Veteran Service Recognition Act would do, sorry, this chair door squeaking, it's bothering me, is provide an avenue, making it easier for non-citizen members of our armed services to apply for naturalization if they choose so. And at the same time, it would establish a review process for a non-citizen a member of our military, or actually I say non-citizen veteran, member of the military, or their family members who are in removal proceedings, and it would basically allow for ICE to review those proceedings, and hopefully, put a pause to them. And third, it would provide an opportunity for non-citizen veterans who have been deported or ordered to be removed to again delay or waive that removal order. It passed the House Judiciary Committee, and we're just waiting here whether or not it's going to be brought to the floor for a floor vote. Like many of our immigration bills right now, we've passed several this year. We passed them in the House, and because we do not have the votes on the Senate side, they hardly ever get introduced over there. It's unfortunate, but it's just the reality. The American Dream and Promise Act, for example, is one of those bills that would help Daca students, DACA recipients, earn a legal pathway to citizenship. And while it has the support of a majority of Americans in the United States, it's something that people would like to see happen. It just does not have the support on the Senate side. It needs 60 votes, as you all know, it needs that 2/3 majority. So it's, I believe it's 60 to get past the filibuster. So at this time, it's not going anywhere. There are other pieces of legislation that have also been recently passed. One in particular that I believe it's one of the would be of interest to you guys. It's called the American Families United Act. That also was introduced in the last two months by, I think it was Russ Escobar out of Texas or New Mexico. And that bill will allow immigration officials to use their discretion when processing residency petitions for immigrants who are married to U.S. citizens and who are facing administrative inadmissibility rules. That, again, is likely to pass the House, but it's going to get stuck in the Senate where we just can't get any. Unfortunately, immigration is just one of those become a platform item for Republicans, even though the data shows that a majority of Americans want to see immigration reform brought up before the legislature. It's mainly used as a scare tactic to scare people to believing that there's all kinds of crime and like serious crimes associated with immigration, when the reality is less than 4% of migrants or immigrants who come to the United States have any sort of serious crime background. And I'm not saying 4% is nothing. It's still 4%, but it's not as ugly as they make it seem. And so until we're able to put some humanity back into the conversation, you know, and have a real conversation with our colleagues across the aisle, or we get a larger majority on the Senate side, immigration is going to be just a tough item to get through. I mean, we've seen what's his name, Mark Rubio, for example, who was one of the original sponsors of an immigration reform bill. I want to say back in like 2006, has now done a complete 180 and is against immigration because it's just such a powerful platform tool that, you know, I think no one did better than the Trump administration to really weaponize that item. So that's immigration for you. You also mentioned Friendship Park. I'm sure you heard the news that I think it was mid last week, CBP announced that they were going to pause the construction of the new barrier at Friendship Park. They were planning to build a barrier up to that. I think it's like the 300. What is it? The 30 foot wall, 30 foot height. And then they were planning on building the doors, which are adjacent to each other. Move the primary door further east about 300 yards, which in our opinion, it would have just created another obstacle or excuse to opening the doors so that family members can potentially see each other, hold Sunday service, do all the wonderful things that the Friends of Friendship Park advocate for, and was the main reason why the park was established to begin with. So fortunately, we were able to get a letter to CBP signed by a number of our colleagues on the CHC, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, California delegation, and all of our San Diego delegation, asking them to delay the project so that we could have an opportunity to discuss exactly what their plans were. And we also asked them to work with our community organizations, advocates for the park, to try to find some middle ground where they could accomplish the goals that they're hoping to accomplish when it comes to securing the area and along the Mexican border in Friendship Park, while also accommodating the needs of the community and maintaining the original vision of the park. They announced that they would pause. First of all, they did mention prior to this that their hope was to reopen the park one day, but we never really got anything in writing. In their press release, they put in the press release that they are hoping to open the park at some point, at least twice a month. We're hoping it'll be a lot more than twice a month, but it's a starting point, and that they are going to be working with our community organizations like Friends for Friendship Park, for example, to try to find some sort of again, middle ground, so that while we may not get everything we advocate for when it comes to the reopening of the park, it'd be great to get some of those big wins. The border wall height is just, it's a whole other argument. That the height of the wall is really causing more harm than good, in my opinion. I think the Congress member feels the same way. I haven't really had an opportunity to have this discussion with them. But we've just seen the numbers of severe injuries and deaths increase due to the wall height. And, we always, when we heard the stories about this great big beautiful wall preventing people from coming, we always knew that was not going to be true. I mean, people have been building walls for thousands and thousands of years, and people find a way around it. I mean, there's people out there that are desperate to get out of the situation they're in, to find a way to help support their families. And a wall is not an obstacle that, it's not going to be an obstacle that they see that they can't get around somehow, either over, under, well, not under these days, but or around it. So we've been working with CBP to try to point out these issues. We'll see where we get with that, but that is something that my boss has been adamantly opposed to, is the border wall height. And you've probably seen that he's been also very vocal about Friendship Park. So we heard that we've been given 120 days for this review process to allow a conversation with Friends of Friendship Park. We are in the process of writing a letter right now to get more details, exactly what from CBP, what the plan is, and also to be asking them to inform us when the meetings occur, what's the outcome of the meetings, so that we're well aware of the situation. I think that's all the items I had on my list with regards to items you were hoping to hear from me about. I will open it up for questions if anybody has any.
Okay, are there questions? Mary, do you want to state your question again?
Well, I'm not sure that Eddie has any better crystal ball about comprehensive immigration reform. It seems mostly that the outcome of the midterms will help determine that, as well as coming years. We probably lost whatever headwind we thought we might have had last year, but there's other priorities, and frankly a lot of wins for the administration in the last couple of weeks. But if you have any miracle words or incremental things you think we could do now to get ready, I'd be open to hearing those. Right.
Comprehensive, like I said earlier, comprehensive immigration reform is going to be a challenge, mainly because of the dialogue that's out there and the lack of votes on the Senate side to stop any sort of filibuster. On the House side, we'll pass it, as the House is right now. I mean, things could change come November and next year, should we lose either one or both of the House or the Senate. You're right, things have changed in the last month, with as far as some of the wins the administration has been able to achieve with the CHIPS and Science Act and the PACT Act and even the Inflation Reduction Act, which the House is set to vote on tomorrow. These are all great, and we've actually seen signs of the economy possibly turning the corner. It's too early to tell. So these are all positive signs that can be helpful. But at the end of the day, we need Republicans to support comprehensive immigration reform. We need them to see the common sense, get past all the negative rhetoric and really just nonsense, because it's not based on fact. All it is really fear mongering, and see why we need to pass something that not only tries to find a legal pathway for those individuals who are here already, but creates an avenue for people who are wishing to come to the United States in the future through legal means. Their family aren't waiting 20, 30 years to to come to the United States, even just to visit, finding some sort of system that will permit family members to come visit family members here in the United States, or allow family members here who currently do not have the means to documented means here to return to the United States should they wish to visit family members outside of the United States.
Jane, how about the bills? You need to unmute the bill you're working on.
Yeah, so I have a few questions because I'm part of this, national advocacy, immigration advocacy group, League Immigration Advocacy Group, that's looking at what are some of the really probably more bipartisan potential for bipartisan cooperation. And obviously it's small steps is all we're looking at right now. But one item that seems to be gaining traction is the workforce needs in the country.
Yes.
And so one question I have is, are there, any bills that are kind of moving us in the direction of opening up legal immigration for, workers, visas, asylees? But the second one, I might as well put it all out here, is we've recently become aware of the, it's HR 8433, and it's to revise the registry for green cards. That there's this registry, it's in the Immigration Act of 1929, but the current date that you have to have gotten here before is 1972. And they want this legislation, which was filed by Lofgren in the last few weeks or so, is designed to have it just be a 7-year prior, but it seems to us to be a path in the direction of legalization. It's not, how it's done is in full discretion of the Attorney General. It's not amnesty or any of that stuff, and you have to have good moral character. But are you aware of that bill? And what do you think of it?
I may have seen something about, it sounds familiar. So I'm thinking I may have seen something somewhere about it. I am actually looking at it right now. Renewing.
I don't want you to go beyond your comfort zone, but I was just curious if you'd heard of it,
I'm taking a look
it's
at it
probably
right
not going to
now.
pass the Senate anyway, but it's still sort of, how do you nudge this along towards legal immigration, legalization of those who are here?
Right. So that's a great, excellent question. I will take a look at this still later today to try to learn more about it. I do see that it was introduced recently. So this was last in the 20th of July that it was introduced. But
the question about sort of workforce needs and potential you see for legislation along those lines.
There is a bill called the Farm Work Modernization Act, I believe, that also passed the House. That is a bill that I think it had very little bipartisan support, but it had some, and it's a start. And basically, it did what you said. It provided a workforce so that individuals can come to the United States, can have or can either be brought to the United States who are looking to work for work, or who are already here can apply for visa in order to help with our crops, because we know there's a lack of workforce, for the crops, and a lot of it was what's the word I'm looking for? The pandemic really just, as a result of the pandemic and lack of workers, that essential workers, that resulted in our workforce, it really just, I don't want to say highlighted, but the word I'm looking for, it just kind of showed us that there's a need for this type of legislation, and it exposed an area that we really need to concentrate on. And so, without knowing the details, the exact details of that bill on offhand. I just recall that it is a piece of legislation that was bipartisan, just had like 3 or 4 members, if I remember correctly. And it did only, when it passed the committee, it was partisan. It, you know, the members that signed on weren't on the committee, but it passed. And again, that's another bill that's stuck right now in the House, and until we get someone in the Senate to vote for it. But I think there is a need for looking towards either our neighbors to the south or other countries to help us with the workforce to fill those needs, especially now that, you know, there just seems to be so many jobs out there, and we're not able to fill many of the positions. We need an educated workforce as well for teachers. We need the STEM specific workforce to come in and fill those vacancies. So I don't know where all the people went for all these jobs, but we definitely need some.
Well, we have to remember a lot of people died, but
Yeah.
that's only part of it. All right, Jane, anything else?
That's it for now.
Okay. What about real ID? Do you know anything about that?
I haven't seen the real ID in a couple of years now.
Is that
So
going to be a problem for people who aren't documented?
Yes and no. I mean, I think it's the same problems. One thing about the real ID is it kind of created that universal ID that all states had. California has yet to fully comply with that. They've been given an extension. I think it's up either September this year or September of next year when they must come into compliance. But it created like a universal system for identification that that allowed interstate travel. Yeah, I can't really speak too well about that piece of legislation. It's just been a while since I've looked at it. But I don't see it coming around anytime soon again. I haven't heard anything about it.
But it's going to go into effect soon, right?
Yeah, so the pandemic kind of like, they gave an extension to all states because of the pandemic. So again, I think it's September of this year or next year that it goes into full effect.
Yeah, I think it's next year, but even so, I mean, like my family has a couple of girls from Afghanistan who are living with them. They can't travel after that.
Right. And so one thing I forgot to mention, there are a couple pieces of legislation right now hoping to help some of the migrants, the refugees that came over either from the last year's evacuation of Afghanistan by when the United States left last year, and we had that surplus of refugees that left Afghanistan and came to the United States. There was a need. They created a program, but the program wasn't sufficient in order to migrate everybody and get everybody in the system so that they could permanently stay in the United States, SIV programs. And so recently the House introduced a bill called the Afghan Adjustment Act, which would extend the program in order for more of these individuals who are basically waiting for their application to get processed. It just expands the program so that the United States can process more applications and individuals can get the registry and the work permits they need to work. Now, with regards to the Real ID program, yeah, it's going to make it difficult for individuals to travel through the airlines, for example. States like California, I'm not sure what's going to happen with their driver's license program that they have for non-immigrants or non-residential aliens, I guess they're called. But yeah, I'm gonna have to look into the Real ID program a little bit.
I mean, there are millions of people who are going to be grounded because of this.
next year, right?
Okay, my other question is, why some bills get through the Senate and why some don't? I mean, some of them, they have different levels of voting acceptance for a bill, right? What? How do you choose which ones?
So in order for pieces of legislation that pass the House, or even if they come before the Senate first and come to the House second, it typically needs to any bill that members of the Senate don't like. For example, there could be just one senator that doesn't like a piece of legislation, can do the filibuster, right? And you're familiar with the filibuster, where they go up there and they'll just talk all day, preventing an opportunity to vote for the vote, to vote on the bill for passage. And you have to have enough senators to end the filibuster, which is the 60 votes, in order to pass any piece of legislation. And so when you have these bills that are more partisan in nature, and you're unable to achieve, especially when you have the 50-50 split that we have right now, even with Kamala, the vice president, providing the tiebreaking vote, we still need to meet that 60 vote threshold in order for any piece of legislation that comes before the Senate to end the debate on the bill. And that's what they're doing. They just keep debating on the bill and never give it an opportunity to come up for a vote, which is one of the reasons there were many members of Congress, Senate and the House side, who wanted to see a change of the rules to end the filibuster, where it would just make it a simple majority vote. That to change the rules, all you need is 50+1. So that can be done, but there are concerns, and they're valid concerns, that in doing so opens up the floodgates for legislation. When, let's just say someone wants to pass a piece of legislation that we're not all in favor of, now they, instead of having an opportunity to filibuster it ourselves, it could be like anti-immigration, for example. All you need is 50+1. So that's the problem. While it's a safety guard, it just creates an issue when you can't have that majority vote on the Senate side to pass a piece of legislation.
Okay, so the bill they just passed didn't get a filibuster, right? Yeah.
Right.
Okay. All right, are there other questions? Kim, welcome. Kim is the president of the San Diego League.
Thank you. Sorry I'm late.
Um,
Nice to meet you.
I just wanted to know if the league could send any kind of major letter of support regarding this whole issue of the height of the wall and Friendship Park. I think we feel strongly that obviously Friendship Park should be open and individuals should have an opportunity to share with their families. So I don't know if there's a particular group that we could send a major, hopefully, letter of support that would be some help.
I know
that
the
has
friends.
to be, that has to be decided by the league board.
No, I understand that, but if he
Yeah.
says yes, then the league board should evaluate doing that.
Right.
Yeah. So if the league does choose to vote and support something, you could send it to two places. You can send it to the Friends of Friendship Park. I know that they're collecting letters of support, and I'm sure they would love to have your support. They have over 200 letters throughout the United States of different organizations. And you could most certainly send it to your members of Congress, San Diego delegation, California delegation, whoever you would like to send it to.
Where's ISA on this?
Silent.
Huh?
He's silent.
Silent?
On this.
ISIS.
Yeah, he's silent on the friends on the Friends of Friendship Park. He hasn't said anything about it.
Okay.
He did sign on to our letter. And with it comes to the fence, he's for the fence, for the border
what?
wall height. And when it comes to the border wall height, he's
Yeah.
in support of that.
So he's just willing to negotiate with them. Is that when he signed on to the letter?
So he didn't sign on to the letter at all.
Oh,
So we had the San Diego delegation minus their life.
Oh, okay. Okay. Any other questions for Eddie? This has been very helpful. It's great to have the inside word from Congress, and you sure are doing a lot of work down there, so we appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
And
Burl, I do have a question. This is Wendy.
oh, Wendy, hello.
Yeah, been listening. Is DACA on the table anywhere at the moment, or is it put aside?
It's unfortunately it's put aside right now.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know when and if they're planning to bring that up this year, but it's put aside for the time being.
Yeah. Burl, I did look up California Real ID a couple weeks ago for some reason, and I think it's postponed to like October of next year.
Right.
October.
I Google knows, but it's not this year, this calendar year for sure.
Yeah, but I mean, the whole concept is.
It's here whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Thank you.
I mean, unless there's a way for people who are not documented to be able to travel, this is a very difficult problem. I mean, even these immigrants who are crossing the border and they're going to their family or something, they don't have ID. And,
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure, Susie.
If they have a passport from their country, they could travel with that, couldn't they?
No.
They have to have a visa.
No?
Yeah.
So if they don't have a visa on the passport, they can't, but they've gotten into the country with it, they can't go from one state to another.
Correct. And
Yeah,
you have to also consider that many of these individuals don't have passports.
Yeah, I know.
Either they never had one or they were taken away once they came to the United States. We're seeing this happen right now with the refugees that are being transported from Texas and I want to say Arizona to our inner cities. There's still a lot of questions about how these individuals, what is being said, these individuals, to get them to board a bus. I'm sure many of them just want to try to get us away from the border, as far away from the border as they can. But when they do travel, everything's being taken away from them. They have no contact information, no phones, no identification, no paperwork. When they arrive in Washington, D.C., for example, because this is where I've seen it personally, they are dropped off at the bus station, and that's it. Not told where to go or who they could contact. Recently, there's been organizations that have been meeting them at the bus station, trying to help them out. But many of our services that were appropriated are along the U.S.-Mexico border. So a lot of the funding that is provided will help these individuals get to that next level, get to a family member. Those resources are closer to the border. So when you tip someone, when they're transporting these individuals to places like New York and Washington, D.C. and any other big city, there's a lack of resources in those areas because they haven't had to deal with that before. So that's become a major problem. And again, with them not having any sort of ID, and even I'm not even sure what kind of paperwork they are carrying, but those are the stories that we've heard.
And is the Congress doing anything about that?
At this time, we need the cities, and I know that they're starting to make this request for assistance to redirect some of the FEMA money that is currently at our ports of entry. Now that we see that the need is going inland, there's some talk about trying to figure out what we can do to redirect some of the funding so that they're able to provide the support. But they need to build their networks up too, and that's one of the problems. And it's not an easy task. I'm sure. Dana, you were with Jewish Family Services, right? Working with them. I'm sure you're well aware that the networks that you need to build, they just don't come overnight. It takes time.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And they have gotten state funding, federal funding to carry it out. So, yeah, I just think what Texas and Arizona is doing is just not fair to those people. They're like using them as pawns, in their political game, which is so sad.
If they've been able to get, I know a lot of, I know a couple of families that they've applied for asylum and it's been years. And I think part of it, they're just either not priority or they're not enough judges or individuals to hear the cases. I thought I had heard there was some movement to start to increase those to begin to act, hear the cases. Is that true, or where are we at with that?
That is true. There has been a push to try to increase the number of judges. I can't speak in detail as to where that's at right now, but I have read that as well on our congressional, something that's called Dear Colleagues, where they tell us, what people are talking about, what members are doing. There's also, so one of the big things that was a result of the Trump administration is they did away with immigration judges' ability to hire, and something that the ability to hire immigration judges and some sort of oversight. I can't remember exactly what it was, some sort of unionization of immigration judges to make sure that you had the right judges in there, not just judges that were anti-immigration, for example.
Right.
And there's been talk about trying to change that. What's that? Yeah, there's been talk about trying to reverse some of those policies that the Trump administration has done, and they've been working on that. I just don't know what.
Your dad and I are gonna.
All right, somebody needs to mute themselves, please. So, okay, so the unions were trying to get more qualified people. Often the judges are prosecutors. But I mean, it seems to me that the government isn't keeping up with the needs of its services and the number of people involved. They could take our tax money, but they don't seem to increase the number of people doing work. USCIS is another one that's way behind in their work.
Yeah, one of the things, so, I mean, I hate going back and saying the previous administration, but it really was just so harmful, some of the policies that they put together that created such a bottleneck with, NPP and even Title 42, where now instead of USCIS having, and they already had a very long wait period to begin with them having a typical 3 to 9 month, 1 year wait. Now it's like 18 months, and a lot of it had to do with just the policy changes that occurred under his administration. And we are trying to reverse that, but some of it, from my understanding, has been very slow to accomplish. They've been very slow to get that done.
Well, we can hire immigrants to do it, right? Yeah, who said?
This is Wendy.
Oh, okay.
At your presentation that I indirectly met you at last November, I think it was, the two speakers brought to our attention that the immigration court, the administrative side of that is all paid for by the immigration, the fees that people pay to file for immigration and amnesty, et cetera. So the US government by itself has avoided funding any of that. And so that opens up a new funding requirement, which of course, we all know what we're going to hear. It'll contribute to inflation, but our government does not actually do anything financially to support that process.
Yeah.
So it's limited by the funds that come in. And then of course, how those in control of those funds choose to spend them is another question. But it's actually not something in the legislative process at this time unless they start funding that process.
Yeah, good point.
And that astounded me, by the way.
Yeah, Ralph.
Basically, make a distinction between the immigration judges. They are funded directly through an appropriation. It's the CIS, the processing of applications for temporary or permanent entry to the United States and renewals of employment authorization. These are the ones that are based on fees. And Congress does have money in the works in the appropriation this year supplemented, but it's a very modest amount. It'll help a little bit. But it'll be the first time that, very, very long, I don't know, 40 years that we haven't been totally based on fees, which is really,
and it's an effort, right? And it's an effort to try to kickstart the program. So if you got a little bit of money in there and you just start feeding into it, and the fees that are then paid for by individuals who are in the process will help move it along. But you're right.
Thank you, Ralph.
Okay. Oh, Robert.
Yes, Eddie, I got a question for you. It's kind of like two-part. It deals with when Title 42 gets rescinded. Have you heard of, or is there anything in the works as far as a process that will be followed so that those seeking protection will be able to present themselves to the border to be able to apply for asylum? And the second part of that is, do you know anything about CBP-1, if that is something that perhaps the government is trying to utilize to take over that process?
So let me work backwards here. CPP-1 is something that's new to me that I need to look into. I've heard some talk about it. I'm not too familiar with it. I know that it's something that we're all supposed to be able to use with our phones. But I really need to do a deep dive in there to learn more about the program. I've heard concerns.
What is it?
So again, it's not something that I'm too familiar with. I just barely started hearing about this like a week ago. But apparently with your phones, if you are applying for, asylum or some sort of immigrant visa, you use your phone to register, and you'll receive notifications when maybe your court hearings are coming up, or if you need to submit additional paperwork. It's something along those lines. Again, I'm not too familiar. Robert, maybe you know a bit more.
Yes, that is part. The main part is, for example, for commercial entries of commercial loads like trucks and such, that they can make that appointment to be able to enter their goods. And I understand it's being used partially for those seeking asylum, that they can actually apply through that mobile app. However, there's been a big concern of the immigrant rights community because it does register your biometrics on that app along with facial recognition. So therefore, you can be tracked from the moment that you applied to when you enter the U.S. and wherever you may be. So that has raised some real concerns in the community. On the other hand, some of the feedback that we've had from some of the migrants is that if their life is in danger, and they, at any moment can be killed, how much worse can it be for them? Which are, both very valid questions.
And that's based, and Robert, those are some of the concerns that we've heard about it and what we're trying to look into. Again, since it's something new, I need to do a deep dive into see exactly what's in there, what CBPs are permitted to do or DHS is permitted to do when it comes to facial recognition, tracking. Again, you could say as well as like, if they're not here to do any harm, what does it hurt to have this information? But it's just the precedent that it sets. And so that's something we're going to dive deep now. I'm going to dive deeper into. Now, Title 42, the first part of your question. So the last time there was talk about lifting Title 42 a few months ago, before a judge basically said we couldn't. Homeland Security, DHS, and CBP were working on procedures, trying to figure out how they're going to implement the reopening and processing. So they haven't had that conversation with us again. I would imagine that that's coming soon. I know that it's also something that the CHC is asking about. So I don't have an answer, a good answer for you now, other than we are working with CBP to figure out what they're planning to do, so that we're able then to reach out to our community-based organizations who are going to be there to help these individuals and provide them with that information or make the connection.
Thank you, Eddie.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we should get an update from you at some point, huh?
Sure.
All these questions, but we should.
I got a lot of homework here.
Yeah, right. Okay, well, anything else for Eddie before we let him go? Oh, Jane, yeah.
The interplay of Remain in Mexico and Title 42 has been kind of tricky to track. And I know just this past, I believe, Monday or Tuesday, Remain in Mexico, has been canceled. And there's a lot of court stuff behind that, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. But because Title 42 is still in place, does it really mean much that Remain in Mexico is over? I was going to ask Robert that, actually, because you're more, you're there on the border, but it's there's been some fanfare about its ending.
So one thing, and I'll let, I know part of the question was to Robert. So from what I've heard and read is CBP is prepared to process something like 15 to 25 individuals a day. Not sure, that's really not going to make much of a dent, right? Especially with who we currently have waiting along the U.S.-Mexico border here in our area and along the entire southern border. But that is what they're telling us they could process. And of course, there's the back end to that. After they get processed by CBP, then we have to make sure that our organizations on the ground, CBOs along the U.S.-Mexican border, have the resources they need, and we're not flooding them with too many bodies that they're unable to do the work that they do to try to get them to the right place or connect them with family, get them the resources they need. Now, and that's something that once it starts moving forward, we'll be moving directly with Jewish Family Services. We'll be moving Catholic Charities and all the different organizations here locally that assist with that, really take on the heavy load here. Robert, I think a lot of the question is, what's going to happen with the families that are currently waiting And
Oh,
these
but
are
there-
people, it doesn't even include people that are going to be approaching the border afterwards.
Do you mean 15 to 25 more? Because we already do 70.
Maybe that's what they meant. Angel, who's not here today, otherwise I would ask him, but he told me about this just the other day.
Okay.
Yeah, the current process is 70 per day, but those are through Title 42. As far as MPP, I'm not real clear as to exactly what's going on with it in regards to Title 42. Obviously, if they were under MPP and they're in the U.S., then I imagine they would be permitted to remain in the U.S. and not be sent back to Mexico under Title 42. What I'm not clear on are those that are already in Mexico, whose court dates were bypassed, or they did not make their court dates because they were never informed as to what's going to happen with them. I understand they're going to be permitted to enter to reopen their court proceedings, but I'm not 100% on that either.
It just happened this week, so I think it's probably just starting to.
Kind of new too.
Yeah,
But
thanks.
the 70 people are on humanitarian parole or something,
Those
right?
are under Title 42 humanitarian parole. That is
So, and they only have a year in the US?
usually it's a year that they are allowed, and of course during that year they have to file their asylum claim.
Oh, okay.
And one of the things that, if there's anything positive about it, is that they can also file for a work permit. And of course, a lot of them try to file or they do file for that work permit immediately as soon as they enter. In this way, they're able to, of course, be able to work and be able to support themselves.
Okay. All right, we need to let Eddie go, poor guy.
Yeah.
We keep coming up with new ideas, but
Well,
thanks so much.
I do. You're very welcome. I do appreciate it. There's definitely, I think, plenty more that I need to look into here. It's just reminders that, with the READ, for example, the READ issue coming up next year, it is going to cause a problem if we're not prepared for it. And so I need to do a little bit of research there. The judges, CBP 1, Title 42, MPP, there's all these things that, we need to get done. And I plan on looking into these so that, at the very least, I'm prepared for this when it comes around.
Well, you want to come back and talk with us or send us an email? What would work?
Most happily, I would be most happy to.
Okay.
We could talk offline on figuring out what the best way would be.
Great. Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
All right. This has been
Bye-bye
great.
all.
Thank you.
Eddie, thank you very much. And if you're in San Diego, August the 20th, that's our Friendship Park 51st anniversary. We're going to have an incredible concert on the Mexico side with Javier Batiz, who was the guitar mentor of Carlos Santana. So it's going to be an incredible event. If you're in San Diego, you're more than welcome.
That's
Appreciate
wonderful.
I'm actually in San Diego, but on that weekend, I'll be up in LA. But I will mention that to our staff.
Please, we'd love to have you or the staff or anybody here from the league accompany us.
Sounds great. Thank you for the invite.
Thank you.
All right. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye. Thank you. All right. Where are we? Any